So today on GMF, I want to talk about my top 10 horror movies of 2020. 2020 was a pretty good year for horror, even though it was kind of a shitty year in general. Let's get right into it.
Number 10.
Number 10, The Invisible Man. A lot of people like to crap on this movie. They call it more sci-fi than horror, which it somewhat is, and the plot may be a little woke, but performances, especially from Elizabeth Moss, were really good, and the effects were really good. Overall, it was a quality-made horror film, and I really enjoyed it. Also, it's nice to have a decent comeback to the Universal Monster Universe that's not the 2017 version of the Mummy.
Number 9.
Number 9, The Hunt. This movie had some unwarranted controversy. It had some unneeded social commentary. It had a big release delay after a shooting back in 2019. And then it had one of the most unfortunate release dates of any horror movie of this year, as it opened right before the pandemic on my birthday, March 13th. All that aside, I thought this was a really entertaining action horror flick, and Betty Gilpin was absolutely great in this film.
Number 8.
Number 8 is Snatchers. This is one I don't really hear many people talking about. It was stuck in release and development hell for a couple years after it was cut as a web series back in 2017. It finally got a film release this year. It's got some really funny moments, some really gross moments, some great gore, some great effects, and some great performances by Mary Neppy and Gabrielle Elise. Overall, it's just a really fun sci-fi horror flick. Everybody should see it.
Number 7.
Number 7 is Underwater. Very simple. This is aliens underwater. It's a creature feature. They're trapped on a deep sea vessel. It's got some great effects, super fast paced, great action, and it has a really solid cast with Kristen Stewart and TJ Miller, who really stood out for me in this one. It's just an action romp, but lots of sci-fi horror with some good gore. It's a lot of fun.
Number 6.
Number 6 is The Wolf of Snow Hollow. It's a really cool creature feature that's actually more about the characters and their foibles than it is about the creature itself. It has a great cast, written and directed by Jim Cummings, with Ricky Lindholm, and the last performance of the late great Robert Forster. It's a great one to watch on a snowy, cold night, and it's just a great, fun horror film overall.
Number 5.
Number 5 is The Mortuary Collection. I was totally surprised at how much I love this horror anthology. I thought the stories were twisted, the performances were good, it has lots of great gore, the soundtrack and the look of the film really lift it up as one of the best horror anthologies in recent memory for me. It's top notch. I really loved it. It's streaming on Shudder. It's easy to check out.
Number 4.
Number 4 is The Rental. It's a great premise, and one that's been done before, but it's done really well here. Somebody ends up dead, they have a dead body, they don't know what to do with it. That's the premise. It's really simple, but it works. This movie literally gave me anxiety as I put myself in the position of the main characters as they tried to figure out their situation, and it just gets worse and worse like a bad dream. It's creepy as hell, and it's a must-see.
Number 3.
Number 3 is Becky. The only thing better than a home invasion film where the tables get turned on the invaders is when the one turning the tables is a 13-year-old girl. The whole cast is great. But this movie is all about Lulu Wilson taking out the bad guys until she gets to Kevin James, who does a surprisingly great job playing the head psycho. This movie has some great gore, some great kills, and overall it's just a blast.
Number 2.
Number 2 is VFW. This one's also a blast. This movie has a great cast of unbelievable classic actors that have been in so many great films over the year. You get Stephen Lang, Fred Williamson, Martin Kove, William Sadler, and even George Wendt from Cheers. They're the local veterans at the local VFW. A girl comes in who has stolen some drugs from the local drug freaks, and these are not your run-of-the-mill drug freaks. These are almost like zombified drug freaks, and a battle ensues, and it's just amazing. You get some great gore, some great action. It's just a hell of a lot of fun, and it is my number 2 movie of 2020.
Number 1.
Number 1 for me is Spontaneous. I've watched this movie 3 or 4 times now, and if you had told me at the beginning of the year that my favorite horror film of the year was going to be more of a romantic and dramatic comedy than a horror film, I would not have agreed with you, but this movie is absolutely great. The plot is about spontaneous combustion, so it's a really original idea because I don't think I've seen very many movies about spontaneous combustion. I could probably count them on one hand or maybe 2 or 3 fingers, the number of movies about spontaneous combustion. But you get, kids blowing up, so obviously you're going to get some good gore and some good effects there. But the main draw here is the performances from Charlie Plummer and Kathy Langford, who do a great job in this one. It's just a really great film with a really interesting story. It'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, it'll shock you. Overall, it's not only my favorite horror film of 2020, it's my favorite film of 2020, hands down, period.
Honorable mentions.
2020 was a great year for horror, and here's some of my honorable mentions. The Lodge had some good performances, a good twist. It was just a little too slow for my taste, but it is a good horror film to watch on like a snowy night. Alone was a solid little survival horror thriller. Freaky is kind of a funny play on the Freaky Friday formula, and had some good performances from Vince Vaughn and Catherine Newton as they kind of reverse roles. Run was a solid little thriller with some good performances from Sarah Paulson and first-time actress Kiera Allen, who also happens to really be disabled in real life, even though she played a disabled character in the movie. Rabid was a solid remake of Cronenberg's classic film from the Soska sisters, has some great body horror and gore in it. Come Play was an interesting little technology-based supernatural flick with some really creepy imagery, and it felt kind of pertinent to 2020 since it's about a kid kind of getting possessed by his iPad, and these kids are spending so much time in front of tablets and screens now that a lot of them are only in school part of the week or whatever. It's an interesting film to watch in 2020. Color Out of Space is a weird sci-fi horror flick, some really creepy moments and some good gore. Out of the 5 movies Nick Cage makes every year, he usually has 1 or 2 good ones, and I would say this was probably his good one for 2020. Open 24 Hours is a really solid 80s style of a slasher flick with a good twist and some good gore. It was a quiet movie I didn't hear a lot of people talk about, but a good slasher for 2020. The Wretched is a creepy little witch film. It's weird and kind of understated, but very creepy. And then Possessor is plain and simple probably the weirdest film I watched this year, and it had some great body horror, some good gore, a freaky premise, and it really shows that Brandon Cronenberg can make films just as freaky and creepy as what his father can make.
This has been Games, Movies, Food Top 10 Horror Movies of 2020. Be sure to leave your hatred in the comments below, but still click like. Find us at gamesmoviesfood.com.